Thanks, Brian. Yeah, I wanted to take the chance and give you guys some tools that you can actually use to explore the carbon cycle and biomass and some of the information that Dr. Podest was talking about today. And I know a lot of people were really excited and impressed by the breathing earth, right? And some things like that. And so I'm going to take us back to a tool that we've talked about before in our Trees Around the Globe webinars, and it's a great place to just start some interesting investigations to explore some patterns. And this is the NASA, the WorldView website. And here is a great place where you can actually see some of the smoke, some of the dust, some of the clouds, and track some of the breathing and dynamic Earth here on this website. Now, hopefully at this point, you've come to recognize some of the patterns of remote sensing data, where we have part of the Earth has been imaged and the other half hasn't. And so remember, we have to go back a day to actually see the last recent observation. But here, we can actually start to see some of the patterns and some of the colors that Dr. Podest was talking about. And depending on the time of year, you can actually zoom in on Africa here and watch that dust being transported off of the Sahara Desert, like she mentioned. And then, importantly, you can use this to track all kinds of interesting patterns. And so I am going to go back because this was something that was kind of brought up before. Is back in August we had these big wildfires in the western part of the United States. So as you can see, we can just zoom forward and look at the patterns at various points in time. And you can see I'm trying to kind of go forward to when we actually had some of those fires break out. And so here is an example of the carbon cycle in action. So here is Northern California, and here we're actually seeing those smoke plumes that is converting a forest similar to what's behind me into different chemical parts. Some of it's going to the atmosphere, some of it's getting burned up. So you can see the difference between smoke and the carbon cycle versus water on the coast here. And so what's really interesting about this is, you can look at particular events and watch the carbon cycle actually happen like that. The other thing that I'll point out that you can do is we can change this and look at monthly cycles. And so I'm actually going to just go back a little bit in time. Wow, there's another example of August, Northern California on fire. And so, but you can actually animate your own map by using this little button right here. And so you can change some different parameters, but we can go between August 2018 and let's go forward to August around the same time. So we have 2 years. So you can go through and you can actually, it will load the imagery and actually give you this sort of time series, similar to what Dr. Podest was showing. And so here we're just looking at what the satellite image sees from space. The nice thing is you can actually get different layers inside of here that might relate more towards the carbon cycle. Actually finding the fire, for instance, you can come in and you can turn on the thermal data and actually see some of those fires and make an animation similar to what she was showing. Here is the hot spots from that fire that we were just looking at. And so you could actually go through and create your own animation on a daily increment, a monthly increment, or yearly increment to highlight the carbon cycle in some of that same way that Dr. Podest was showing you. And you can save that animation right here and actually get some of the data. So WorldView, we keep highlighting this because it's an incredible tool to access a lot of the NASA data sets. So I wanted to highlight that because making these animations isn't just for NASA folks. In fact, here is a tool that you can use to create your own animations. So please, take the time to zoom in on your area and make some different animations to explore questions, explore patterns, explore the carbon cycle as it's happening in your area. And again, you can change that increment that you are looking at from a daily, monthly, or yearly piece. And so we hope to see some creativity with this, because that is something that can be embedded in these presentations that you are making for the IVSS, or if you just want to share it with your local community, what's actually happening there. Okay, so that was not really what I wanted to highlight today, but that since we had a lot of interest in those animations and just how the satellite view can reveal the carbon cycle and some of these patterns, just really interesting. But what I wanted to kind of highlight today is, and Dorian Janney there was highlighting the value of these pictures. One thing that I think is important is that you can actually estimate biomass just by simply looking at a picture behind you, or in my case, behind me. And the key here is just how many trees are in that picture. How dense is that landscape? And so, just by taking your land cover observations or your tree height observations and looking at those pictures, you can actually get a good understanding of that above ground biomass piece that Dr. Perez was talking about. And in fact, when we look at our base map here, we can see these areas of high biomass. These are the green areas that show up on our globe visualization base map. And when I start looking at this, we can actually see the green areas, the high biomass down here in the Amazon. And you can zoom in and you can actually start to see some of those same patterns that Dr. Perez was showing in terms of how land is being used. But what I want to focus on is here I am, and you notice how green it is here. And I'm in an area that has a lot of high biomass. And importantly, what I want to highlight is that you can go in and get those land cover photos, for instance, and turn those on and actually start to get a sense for the different biomass that occurs in different areas. Right. And so if it's really green on these satellite images, kind of green, dark green compared to this light green, that's actually just an indicator of high biomass. And you can see that when you look at any of these pictures where it's really dark green like that. And a component that we can see that tells us biomass is shadow. How shadowy is that? And that's related to the tree height. And so, just by looking at these pictures in these really green or kind of dark green areas that are on that satellite image, we can actually start to see how much biomass is there. Now, we can go out and measure it, but that takes a lot of time. And so that's where the remote sensing, even using your camera as a remote sensing sensor, gives us that ability to estimate biomass and to make that measurement. So it's really useful, like what Dorian was highlighting, to just spend some time in the globe visualization system looking at the green areas compared to the browner areas, and using these pictures to help you to understand that what you understand about biomass and that carbon cycle. It's all in those pictures. But we have NASA data, and so you can actually go and find in the NASA archives estimations, and you can zoom in on this map, and you can use this as a guide to where to look in the globe visualization system. And you can get some estimates for biomass, high biomass areas, low biomass areas. And you can, if you wanted to, actually access and download and work with this data right here. So you actually have access to estimations of biomass or carbon in your ecosystem. So, connecting those up with those ground photos, the ground measurements are a great way to start connecting what you're doing to this important NASA science like that. So, you know, we've got a lot of tools that we will help connect you with starting in January. And so a lot of what we're showing you right now are things that might get you interested, things to explore, areas to start looking at patterns. Why do we have these linear shapes? And some things like that that you might want to explore for the IVSS. And so, you know, this was kind of our big thing, connecting you with NASA biomass estimates and the science of carbon, together with what we're doing here on the GLOBE, with the GLOBE program and with those GLOBE tools. Now, remember, to do a full carbon estimation takes a lot of effort, a lot of measurements. And so that's one reason why the maps that we have are older. They tend to lag behind. And so this is where we can all actually contribute to the updating of this map, which was made for 2010, with our ground measurements. So that's where I'm going to leave it today. But we have a lot of exciting tools that we'll be presenting to help you do some science, to connect you with the NASA tools in actually helping to map, measure, and monitor this carbon cycle. There's a lot of interesting things out there, and NASA has their carbon monitoring system that is looking for data like this. So go out, make your observations, and contribute to us keeping track of what's happening with the carbon cycle.
Thank you, Peter. Does anybody have any questions for Peter? And I should note, you know, this is such, you know, what you're doing on here, Peter, is such a great thing, because it really focuses on what the 2021 IVSS is focused on, and that's data literacy. Because we've been in the middle of this COVID-19 pandemic globally, and a lot of people were on lockdown and weren't able to go out and take observations. So we really wanted to focus on how you can either look at the data you may have taken, or data from the GLOBE database in your location, or even somewhere else that you want to study, who knows. But you can actually go and, you know, understand that data by using tools that Peter has been discussing in the, you know, all the past webinars, and including today. So this is a perfect way for us to get set up for what's going to happen in the second quarter of the campaign, as Peter mentioned, starting in January, where we're going to focus on that. How do you look at the data? How do you work with the data, visualize the data, you know, for your student research projects? And we want to set this up so that it helps you out to the point where you feel super comfortable in looking at the data, because there's so many great tools out there. And that's why Peter is fine tuning, you know, and filtering out the best ones for us to use, you know, that we think that you would most benefit from, you and your students would most benefit from, for student research projects.
Perfect, Brian. Thank you for mentioning that, because that's exactly right. And the data is, there's lots out there. And so our goal is to try to help you figure out what is actually useful. And I will highlight that in one of our last webinars, we put together a project where we were looking at mapping out trees using the high resolution imagery, similar to what Christopher was talking about earlier. And we actually have a project set up that uses the data that he presented today. And so I want to put that out as a teaser so that you guys will come back and actually learn how to use that new data, that high resolution data that Christopher talked about earlier. So we're trying to lure you back to some of our future webinars by teasing some of these tools and recognizing that you didn't learn it all today, and come back and learn some more.